Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices like the original Santorini. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. A few years ago, a great abstract strategy game came out called Santorini. It had great table presence. The game is just amazing. It's one of my favorite two-player sort of abstract games, even though it played 2 to 4 players. And now there's a new version coming out called Santorini New York. Now this is not just a reskin of the original. Now it shares a decent amount of the original game's mechanisms and the goals, but it adds new goals on there and a completely different way to play. So it feels like Santorini, but at the same time it's still a very different game. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of both games, and then I'm going to, we're going to look at this as a versus as to which one should you get. Do you need to own both? Let's take a look. Santorini is a beautiful, three-dimensional abstract strategy game where you're trying to get to the top of a third-story tower to win the game, and it's for 2 to 4 players. During the game, you'll be moving one of your 2 people to any place around it, and then building anywhere around it. Maybe a level 1 building, or maybe a level 2, or if that was already built, maybe a level 3, or if that's already built, maybe a dome so someone can't jump onto the top. But you can shake the game up by adding god powers. There's some simple ones like being able to move more than one spot, or building a dome at any level, or if you move up, your opponent can't move up that turn. There's also some advanced gods which do things that are more complex. All in all, 30 total gods to make the game different every time you play. Santorini New York has the same roots as the original Santorini where you're moving, then building, and if you get to the top of the third, you win. However, you need to have the Statue of Liberty in order to win during a round. And to get that Statue of Liberty, you're going to be playing cards. Each game features 4 different roles that are shared between all players. At the beginning of each round, you're going to get 5 cards secretly, and you'll be selecting one secretly to play, and everyone will simultaneously reveal. And whichever player has played the highest number will gain the Statue of Liberty for that round, meaning they're the only player that can win that round. But all other players going from lowest to highest in number will be able to move, but also use the abilities of their card, possibly stopping this player from being able to win. And these cards do different things like being able to build in 2 different spots, or forcing opponents back when you go into a spot where they are, or passing through everything in a direction to the first unoccupied spot. There's one special role that's in every game, the Engineer, and it has a unique win condition. Not only will you build a skyscraper blocking movement, but after you move, if you're able to make a rooftop on the top of the 3rd floor, you'll win, assuming you have the Statue of Liberty by playing the highest card that round. Even though you start with 5 cards, each turn you're playing 1 card and not drawing, so your choices get more and more limited till you're down to 1 card, and then you'll get 4 more for a hand of 5. This makes future planning a big part of the game. And there's plenty of roles that you can use. One of each of these colors will be in the game along with the Engineer, so the game has quite a bit of replayability as you can mix up the permutations of the different abilities that are shared by all players. Alright, well there's a quick overview of both versions, so let's dive into the pros and cons of both, or which one would you want? Should you get both of them? Let's first talk about components and table presence. Now, the original Santorini was amazing. These different white, you look at pictures of Santorini online and it looks exactly like the game. The components were great, the big blue domes on top, and it just looked amazing. And I gotta say that this New York version, the buildings aren't as impressive as the original, because the original had 3 different levels, like ground, middle, and top, and they were bigger pieces on the bottom and then they went up. Where these pieces in New York, they're all the same size and they all sort of look the same, so those aren't as cool. But the reason why I'm going to give this a tie is what does make it even cooler, or at least it brings it up to the point where it's tied with the original Santorini, are those skyscrapers. These are ginormous, heavy, chunky pieces, and the table presence on this, when you're looking down on this, it looks like Manhattan. It looks like with all these skyscrapers, and because of that, I'm going to say that the components and table presence of this game is a tie. Now, I'm going to break this down a little differently than I normally would. I'm going to put this in sort of different categories. If you're a player that likes sort of a chess-like abstract game, meaning that there's no luck involved, the winner of that game, if that's what you're looking for, is the original Santorini, because that's what that game is. Because you could play it very basic, no powers. It's pretty much like chess. Then you can add the powers. It still feels like chess because there's no randomness. You're just doing that. So for a chess game, a chess-like game with no luck, Santorini wins that one, the original. But if you're looking for a more tactical game, which is instead of looking, from before, but you're looking just right now, and you're looking for a good mix of luck and strategy, then New York is the game that does that better. The interesting thing here is you have those shared powers. And that's really interesting because everyone has the opportunity to play the right powers, but you're not sure what cards they have. You're not sure what they're going to play. And so that gives you this thing of like, they could do this, or they could do this, or they could do this. I'm not sure if they even have that card. And so you really have a lot more to think about, which gives the game almost like more of a gamer edge. I think the original Santorini is a little easier to play. This one has a lot more thoughtfulness to it in that regard. This one also has multiple win conditions now. Getting to the top you can win, but now you need to have the Statue of Liberty, and you can win with that engineer, as I showed, if you can build a rooftop while having the Statue of Liberty and playing the engineer. There's a third way I didn't show that you can win as well, is if you can't play and move on your peoples, or you can't enact out the ability of a card, you must remove one of your pawns. And if you remove both pawns, you're out of the game, and if everyone's out of the game except you win. So it's a third win condition. That will only really happen in games with like 4 or 5 players, maybe. I haven't seen it happen in lower player counts. But if you're looking for a tactical game, the New York version is the one you want. So when you're looking at these, if you're looking for a game where you're thinking multiple turns ahead, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, they might do this, I'm going to do this, and 3 turns from now, I know what I'm going to be doing. Then if you're looking for that type of a game, I'd say the original Santorini is better for you, and it wins in that regard. If you like to think about multiple possibilities on this turn, and maybe think about next turn, but you're really not sure if that's even going to come to fruition, because depending on what happens this turn will change what you're going to do next turn. So if you want to look at this as a more of a, what do I do right now? What are all the possibilities that they can do? What are the possibilities I can do? What is the best thing for me to do right now that will hopefully set me up for the future, even though I don't even know what this round's going to bring, let alone next round. So if you're really to that style of thinking and really like changing your plans turn to turn, then New York is a better fit for you. And it would win that category. The 2-player experience. I am going to say this is a tie. And this is huge for you because Santorini is like one of my favorite games. Even though it plays 2 to 4 players, I usually just played it 2-player. And it's one of the best 2-player mano-a-mano abstract games. And to say that I think New York even ties it, and it's crazy because the games are so similar, but yet so different at the same time. Like, they feel familiar, but yet they feel totally different. And I'm kind of in the middle. Sometimes I'm in the mood for that sort of very quick and easy chess-like, no randomness. And other times I'm like, what card are they going to play? What number are they going to play? And all that, like getting in the other players' heads, simultaneously revealing. So for me, I love both experiences. They are very different, but I really can't choose one over the other. I know that's kind of wavering, but I really love these equally. I could not say I like one over the other. They're both just amazing. So for the 2-player experience, I think it's a tie. Now, if you're playing with more than 2 players, for me, this one was the most obvious between these. The original Santorini had a lot of problems with 3 and 4 players, in my opinion. A lot of it was king making, where it's like you could tell that you weren't going to win. You could tell that somebody had to stop somebody else. You're like, oh, you have to stop them or they're going to win. Well, they spend their turn stopping them, and then next turn, you're going to win. And it comes to this thing as like someone's always stopping somebody else. Now, that can happen in the New York version. But it happens way less likely because the board's a little smaller and you have those skyscrapers that make it harder to move around, harder to sort of isolate yourself. It's like it happens a lot less because of the way that the board works with that. And when the opportunity is there for it to happen, you're never sure who it's going to be because you don't know what order the play order is going to go in. And you don't even know who's going to play. Like if the person that we think can possibly win this turn doesn't happen to have the highest card, well, they can't win anyway. And it kind of like pushes it off to the buck to another turn. So the king making isn't nearly as big. Now it can still happen once in a while, but it's not nearly as much. So I think the multiple player, more than 2 players in New York is very good, to the point where I would always bring this out for a multiplayer abstract game, where the original Santorini I wouldn't. So more than 2 players, New York is the winner here. Variability. Now, if I just state original Santorini has 40 powers and the new one has 14. Well, no brainer, right? Santorini, the original, is going to win this one? Not necessarily. Because in Santorini, you're each only having 1 power, right? In this one, there's 4 different roles. And even though there's 14 different possible roles, the permutations of having 4 different roles, 3 of them that you really switch out, because the 4th one's always there, the engineer. So 3 of the roles And each of those roles have multiple possibilities that you can put on there. Because of the permutations, and each game will feel different with each permutation of that, because some of the abilities sort of like do interesting things when they're played with other abilities. And so because it's a lot less rolls, but the permutations goes much higher, I'm giving this a tie because how those interact with each other is an interesting part of the game. And so because there's less rolls doesn't necessarily mean there's less variability. So this one's a tie for me. Barrier of entry. Santorini, the original, wins this because literally you could just get someone there and go, you move, you build, get to the top, you win. Let's play. I mean, you could teach this game in one sentence, literally. And New York has a lot more going on. We each have 4 roles. You got to know what all these different roles do. We got to see who plays first. Oh, you got to have this to win. There's a lot more layers of game arenas going on with this one. So for the barrier of entry, I'm saying if you're looking for just a quick gateway game to get someone into it, the original Santorini is better. However, I will say that I don't see any reason why you couldn't play New York as the base game. Just throw all the powers away, just play the same thing. Move and get to the top. You could do that. And you could, even if you really want to, just take one of the 4 initial roles that's not the engineer. Say one of us gets, let's put 2 of those roles there, and one of us picks one and one of us picks the other, and that's our power for the game. So you could kind of play this as base Santorini as well. So anyway, in the final, it's really a tie for me. And it's really gonna depend, hopefully this will tell you what you like, which one's better for you. Because they really are 2 different animals, even though they're so similar. And based upon all the different things I just mentioned, you should know for you which game is better. Do you always play with 2? Do you prefer strategic looking ahead with no randomness, or do you like the I'm not sure, the intrigueness of things? That's gonna really be the big thing of that. Or do you often play with more than 2 players? Those are sort of the types of things that should tell you which one to get. If you're like me and you love 2-player abstracts, but you also would like to have an abstract that plays more than 2 players, and you want it to be a completely different feel, there's no problem having both of these in your collection. I am keeping both of these because I love them both and they're still very different. So I think you can have both. I don't think you need both, but you should know which one is better for you after this. And this has been the Game Boy Geek, breaking down barriers, growing relationships through board games, and helping you find the next one you'll love. Lucky Duck Games has 4 new games available now. In the Court of Miracles, you lead a guild of beggars, scheme with sinister plots, and use trickery to build your own renown in an attempt to take over 16th century Paris. Baron Voodoo is an abstract strategy game involving the collection of thematic soul dice, and it made my top 10 most anticipated releases at Essen Spiel this year. Kingdom Rush Rift in Time is a tower defense with epic heroes that includes a campaign and an infinite replayability mode. It was hugely popular on Kickstarter, raising over $1 million. Chronicles of Crime 1400 is a standalone follow-up to the award-winning Chronicles of Crime, where you'll be solving 4 unique crimes in medieval Paris. These are all available in stores now, and you can learn more and order them at luckyduckgames.com.